My parents sneered. "You'll never be as good as your brother." I stood up and said, "Then tell him to pay all the bills. I'm not sending money anymore." My mom was stunned. "What money? We never received a single dollar from you." At my mother's birthday party, she looked at me and delivered a cutting remark. "Lisa, you'll never measure up to your brother. Chase is the one who takes care of this family." I stood up, my heart pounding, and shot back, "If that's the case, from now on, let Chase pay all the bills. I won't send another dime." The room fell silent. My parents' eyes widened in shock. "What money? We've never received a cent from you." I pulled out my phone, opened my bank statements, and the truth that unfolded left the entire family stunned. My name is Lisa Grant, born and raised in Beckley, West Virginia, a small town nestled among lush green hills, where everyone knows each other like the back of their hand, and family stories are often shared over simple dinners. But my childhood was not that warm picture. It was a long series of days spent in the shadow of unfair comparisons, where I was always the one falling short, and my younger brother Chase was the shining star no one could rival. From a young age, I grew accustomed to being pushed to the sidelines, as if I were merely a supporting character in my own family's story. Chase, 4 years my junior, was born with a strange charisma, lively, eloquent, and skilled at charming adults with his radiant smiles or timely jokes. He was the true golden child, cherished by our parents and relatives like a treasure. At every gathering, all eyes were on Chase, while I sat there quietly, waiting for a question or a kind word that rarely came. My father, Gordon Grant, was a coal miner, toiling day after day in dark, grimy tunnels, coming home with a face smeared with coal dust and calloused hands. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, it was often to praise Chase. My mother, Monica Grant, worked as an accountant for a local company, always busy with ledgers and bills. Yet she still found time to brag to the neighbors about her clever son. They didn't mean to hurt me, I know, but their favoritism built up over time, like the layers of coal dust clinging to my father's skin. My parents often overlooked me for reasons that sounded reasonable, but were really just excuses to justify their bias. I was quiet, reserved, and not particularly adept at small talk. I often fumbled when trying to chat with relatives, while Chase could make a room burst into laughter with a single joke. My academic performance was decent, but never earned me major awards or shiny medals to show off. Chase, on the other hand, was constantly praised for participating in all sorts of activities, from youth soccer to school performances, things that made him stand out and draw attention. I loved reading science fiction and tinkering with technology, spending hours in front of an old computer my dad bought at a secondhand market, taking it apart to understand how it worked. But to my parents, that was just dry or burying my nose in computers, as if my interests were a flaw to be fixed. Those repeated comparisons became a smoldering wound in my heart, not bleeding, but aching every late night. "You need to learn from your brother," my dad would say whenever I brought home my report card. Though my grades were steady, they were insignificant to them compared to the praise Chase received. I felt like I was just a shadow trailing behind my brother, a faint silhouette no one noticed or needed. I didn't resent Chase. He was my little brother, and I loved him with genuine sibling affection. But each comparison pushed me further inward, building an invisible wall to protect my fragile heart. One memory still haunts me to this day. One Christmas afternoon, the family gathered around the tree. Chase sang Jingle Bells and earned a round of applause. I sat there holding a homemade gift, a small LED lamp I'd built from spare parts, hoping my parents would like it. When I presented it, my mother glanced at it and said, "You should spend more time playing with your brother instead of messing with these useless things." I nodded, swallowed my tears, and retreated to my room. In the darkness, I wondered, would I ever be good enough in their eyes? Would I always be that shadow? My childhood passed in moments like these, teaching me that family love is sometimes unfair, and invisible wounds can cut deeper than any blade. I found solace in books and technology, where no one compared me to anyone else. But deep down, I still longed for the day my parents would look at me, truly see me, and realize I wasn't Chase's shadow, but Lisa, a person with her own worth, quiet and different though I may be. When I entered my teenage years, I thought things would change, that I'd find my own corner of the sky where I could shine in my own way. But no, Chase's shadow loomed larger and darker than ever, and my high school years only deepened the feeling that I was invisible in my own family and the world around me. At Beckley High School, I was still the quiet, reserved Lisa with hardly any close friends. I wasn't the type to blend in easily. The noisy hallways, the groups of friends laughing together, the school dances, they all felt alien to me. I preferred sitting alone in the library, flipping through books on electronics, or in the computer lab, typing my first lines of code on the school's outdated PC. I found joy in unraveling circuits or writing small programs. But that joy was mine alone. To my classmates, I was just that weird kid glued to her computer. To my teachers, I was a good but unremarkable student, never standing out. Chase was the opposite. He was like a pop star among the student crowd. He joined the basketball team, emceed school events, and always knew how to make people laugh. Teachers loved Chase, not just for his energy, but for his knack for charming adults. Once I overheard my homeroom teacher talking to my mom during a parent-teacher conference. Chase is truly an outstanding student, always full of energy. My mom nodded, beaming as if the praise were for her. As for me, the teacher mentioned me in passing. Lisa does fine, but she needs to be more outgoing. I sat in the corner of the room listening to my mom agree, and it felt like another pebble dropped into my chest. At home, the comparisons continued, sharper than ever, as if my parents were determined to engrave in me that I'd never measure up to Chase. "Look at your brother," my dad would say, his voice brimming with pride whenever Chase brought home a basketball medal or a teacher's praise. That kind of energy is what leads to success. You keep being so quiet. What are you going to achieve? My mom was gentler, but her words cut deeper. "Lisa, you need to learn how to talk, to connect like your brother. If you're not good with people, it'll be hard to get far in life." I just nodded, never arguing, but each word was like another slash to an old wound, making it bleed silently. It's not that I didn't try. I quietly worked hard at school, maintained steady grades, and nurtured a dream of becoming an engineer. I loved engineering. The way circuits connected, the way lines of code created a smoothly functioning system, all of it logical and non-judgmental. In that world, I felt I had worth. I started researching colleges, especially West Virginia University, known for its reputable engineering program. I dreamed of one day standing in a lab, creating something of my own, proving I didn't need to be like Chase to succeed. But I kept that dream to myself because whenever I mentioned engineering, my mom would shake her head. "What good will those machines do? You should learn to communicate like your brother." Once I decided to try changing. I joined the school science club, hoping to do something that would make my parents proud. My group built a small model rocket, and we were chosen to present it. I prepared nervously, thinking this time my parents would see me differently. But on the day of the event, Chase had an important basketball game, and both my parents went to cheer for him. I stood on stage presenting our rocket, glancing at the audience and seeing their seats empty. Later at home, my mom only said, "I was busy watching your brother's game. Next time, let me know in advance so I can plan." I nodded, but deep down, I knew there wouldn't be a next time. When I received the acceptance letter from West Virginia University for the electrical engineering program, it felt like a ray of light piercing through the long, dark tunnel of my life. Standing at the university's gates, gazing at the towering lecture halls and modern laboratories filled with cutting-edge equipment, I told myself, this is where I belong. College wasn't just a chance to learn. It was a place where I hoped to shape who I was, to step out from Chase's shadow and to prove that I had value, even if in a different way. My early days in Morgantown were like a parched woman finding a stream. I dove into my studies with fervor, relishing the time spent in the lab tinkering with complex circuits or writing lines of code that made a small system run smoothly. Every time one of my programs executed successfully with "Hello World" flashing on the screen, my heart raced as if I had just created a world of my own. I didn't need an audience or applause, just the knowledge that I was inching closer to my dream of becoming an engineer. While I buried myself in assignments and part-time jobs to cover tuition, Chase took a completely different path. He dropped out of college after just 1 year, declaring that school was restrictive and not for someone like him. Instead, he threw himself into freelance business, chasing ventures that sounded grandiose but were vague. He frequently called home, regaling our parents with tales of investment ideas, high-level connections with city entrepreneurs, or life-changing plans he was pursuing. Whenever he visited, Chase appeared like a star, dressed in crisp new shirts, sporting the latest phone, and spinning stories about big contracts he was about to sign. I looked at him, wondering where the money came from when he didn't have a steady job. Our parents, as if following a familiar script, continued to favor Chase. They admired him, calling him a go-getter and a visionary. "Chase dares to step out and take risks," my dad said, his voice brimming with pride while I sat quietly clutching my glass of water. "But you, Lisa, just working a regular job. What's that going to get you? You need to learn from your brother and dream big." Those words were like salt rubbed into an old wound, making it bleed silently. I wanted to scream that I was working hard, that every month I scrimped and saved to pay for tuition, rent, and expensive technical textbooks, but I stayed silent as I always had, knowing that speaking up wouldn't change anything. What hurt the most was how my parents supported Chase without a thought for my struggles. To start his ventures, Chase frequently asked them for money, sometimes for a promising tech app, other times to wine and dine business partners at fancy dinners. My parents didn't hesitate to dip into their savings or even take out loans to give it to him. "Chase needs this opportunity to rise," my mom said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Meanwhile, I had to fend for myself at college. Tuition, rent, food, books, everything depended on grueling part-time jobs. I worked as a server at a coffee shop, washed dishes at a restaurant, and occasionally fixed computers for dorm mates to earn a few extra bucks. Once I hesitantly called my mom to ask for a small amount to buy a technical book required for a course. She sighed over the phone. "Things are tight, Lisa. I just sent money to Chase for his business. You'll have to manage." I hung up, sat in my rented room, stared at the stack of secondhand books on my desk, and told myself I had to try harder. My college years were like living as a machine, racing between studying, working, and chasing my engineering dreams. I maintained high grades and earned an internship at a small tech company in Morgantown where I worked alongside real engineers. Excited, I shared the news with my parents over the phone, hoping they'd be proud, but my mom only mumbled, "That's good, Lisa. Keep being independent." I stopped sharing after that, confiding only in a few close friends at school who understood the value of the code I wrote or the circuits I designed. Chase, meanwhile, kept showing off on social media. Photos of him posing next to sleek cars, checking in at upscale bars, or flaunting expensive watches with confident captions like, "The road to success is never easy." I looked at those posts, wondering where the money came from when our parents, who'd spent their lives saving, were struggling to support him. Once I overheard my mom bragging to a neighbor about Chase's big project, her voice full of pride. While I was mentioned only as Lisa, who's in college, probably going to be an engineer. Even from afar, Chase's shadow weighed heavily on me. Every time I called home, my mom would gush about his grand plans while I got perfunctory questions. "How's school? Doing okay?" I answered briefly, knowing they didn't truly care. I still loved my family and cared for Chase, but the feeling of being overlooked pushed me further away. I told myself I'd prove my worth, not through boasts, but through what I achieved. I wanted to become a skilled engineer, to build a stable life, not to outshine Chase, but to be myself. Lisa, a person with her own value, quiet and different though I may be. After 4 grueling years at West Virginia University, I graduated with a degree in electrical engineering and a job offer from a tech company in Austin, Texas. Holding that offer letter in my hand, I felt like the entire world was opening up before me. Austin was a vibrant city, a far cry from the quiet stillness of Beckley with its towering skyscrapers, hipster coffee shops, and booming tech community. My new job as a software engineer allowed me to work on exciting projects alongside passionate colleagues. My income was decent, enough to live comfortably in Austin, but I chose to live frugally. I rented a small apartment, ate simple meals, and allocated most of my salary to paying off the student loans still lingering from my college years. I didn't need fancy cars or expensive clothes, the things Chase always flaunted. For me, stability was the most precious thing, something I'd earned through exhausting part-time shifts and sleepless nights studying. I wanted to build a solid life, not just for myself, but so that one day my parents might look at me with pride. But then a phone call from Mom changed everything. Dad, after years of working in the coal mines, had to retire early due to declining health. The years of breathing coal dust had taken a toll on his lungs, and the doctor advised him against any heavy labor. Mom, who had always been accustomed to her accounting job, switched to part-time work due to her age and the stress of it all. The family's income plummeted to the point where Mom had to pinch every penny to cover monthly expenses. Hearing her voice over the phone filled with worry as she talked about utility bills and Dad's medication costs made my heart ache. I decided to send money to support my parents each month. It wasn't an easy decision. Life in Austin wasn't cheap, but I couldn't stand by and watch them struggle. Every month, I set aside a portion of my salary, about $20,500, to help them get by. I wanted to do this discreetly, without making my parents feel like I was showing off or doing anything grand. There was one problem, though. My parents, especially Mom, weren't savvy with bank transfers. They were used to cash, and every time I mentioned banking apps, Mom would complain, "It's too complicated." I thought of Chase, who still lived in Beckley, close to our parents. I called him, proposing what I thought was a convenient solution. I'd transfer the money to his account, and he'd withdraw it in cash to hand directly to our parents. "It's quick and simple," I said, and Chase agreed immediately, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. "Don't worry, sis. I'll take care of it." I trusted Chase. Despite his flashy lifestyle and occasional irresponsibility, I still saw him as my little brother, someone who wouldn't do anything to harm our family. Every month, I diligently transferred the money, including a note in the transaction description, for parents. I didn't check up on it or ask Mom if she'd received the money because I assumed it was a given. I just wanted them to live more comfortably, and I wanted to do it quietly without anyone knowing I was behind it. I told myself that even if my parents never acknowledged my efforts, at least I was fulfilling my duty as a daughter. In Austin, my life was gradually falling into place. My job as a software engineer not only provided a stable income, but also brought me genuine joy. I loved mornings spent in the office, sipping black coffee, coding by the window, with a view of the bustling streets below. But even though I was far from home, my responsibility toward my parents remained an inseparable part of me. After deciding to send $20,500 each month to my parents through Chase's account, I continued my work and life in Austin with the mindset that I was doing the right thing quietly. I imagined my mom using that money to buy medicine for my dad, fix the leaking roof, or simply live more comfortably. I didn't call to check on things because I trusted Chase, my younger brother, who grew up with me through our days in Beckley, to take care of the family on my behalf. That trust, looking back now, was perhaps my biggest mistake. Occasionally, I called home and heard my mom complain about the cost of living. "Your dad's medicine is so expensive, Lisa," she said, her voice filled with worry. "The roof is leaking again. It cost $1,000 to fix." In those moments, my heart tightened. I increased the amount I sent, sometimes $2,700, sometimes $3,000. Even though it meant cutting back on my expenses in Austin, eating out less, skipping outings with colleagues, I didn't complain because I thought I was doing the right thing. I just wanted my parents to live comfortably, free from the worries of the years they had scrimped and saved to raise us. But while I lived frugally, Chase was becoming increasingly extravagant. Through social media, I saw him showing off a new car, a shiny SUV, and a designer watch glinting on his wrist with photos taken at upscale bars. He posted statuses brimming with confidence. Big work, big life. I looked at those posts and wondered where the money was coming from since he was still freelancing with projects that were never quite clear. But I brushed aside my doubts, telling myself that maybe he had finally succeeded, that his investments had paid off. I didn't want to think ill of my brother, even though sometimes a small voice in my head warned me that something wasn't right. Amid my busy days in Austin, Nicky entered my life like a ray of warm sunshine. He worked in the company's marketing department with a radiant smile and eyes that knew how to listen. We started with short conversations during lunch breaks, where I awkwardly talked about a stubborn coding bug, and he shared details about a new ad campaign. Gradually, after-work coffee dates brought us closer together. Nicky wasn't just a boyfriend. He was my first true confidant. He helped me forget the grueling workdays, the sleepless nights worrying about money, and the lingering sadness of being compared to Chase. One evening, as we sat on a park bench under the soft glow of streetlights, I told him about my childhood in Beckley, about living in Chase's shadow, and about sending money to my parents through him. Nikki listened without judgment, then took my hand and said, "Lisa, you're doing a great thing by taking care of your parents, but you need to be more transparent. Let them know you're the one sending the money so they can see your heart." I smiled and brushed it off. "No need for that. I just want things to be simple, discreet." Nikki shook his head, his eyes filled with concern. "You trust Chase too much. Be careful. Not everyone is as they seem." Our dates became a healing balm. Nikki took me to live music shows at small bars, taught me how to dance despite my clumsiness, and cooked simple dinners with me in my apartment. One time when I was exhausted from a project at work, he showed up with a plate of homemade cookies and we sat watching a comedy movie, laughing until our sides hurt. "You don't need to be like anyone else," he said, resting his head against mine. "You're Lisa, and that's enough." Those moments made me feel lighter, as if Chase's shadow was slowly fading, replaced by the warmth of Nikki's love. But his advice about transparency lingered in my mind. I didn't want to believe that Chase could do anything wrong, but his flashy posts, the new car, the lavish parties, began to stir a vague unease in me. I didn't know that this feeling was leading me toward a painful truth, a truth that would explode at my mother's birthday party, where my trust would be shattered and everything I thought I knew about my family would be turned upside down. My mother's 65th birthday party was the first time I returned to Beckley after nearly a year of being busy in Austin. I wanted to do something truly special to celebrate her. I spent weeks preparing a gift, a compact digital camera, easy to use with a large screen and simple buttons, perfect for Mom, who had once mentioned wanting to capture family moments and the daisies in her garden. I went to an electronics store in Austin, testing each model, carefully weighing the brands. Nikki even helped me check the features, ensuring Mom would love it. "Your mom's going to adore this," Nikki said with a smile, his eyes sparkling as we wrapped the gift in green wrapping paper, Mom's favorite color, and wrote a card that read, "Happy birthday, Mom," from Lisa and Nikki. Nikki agreed to come with me to Beckley, not just for the party, but also to meet my family. I was more nervous than ever. This was the first time I'd brought a boyfriend home, and I wanted my family to see that I was different now. A mature Lisa with a stable job, a respectable life, and a wonderful partner. On the flight from Austin, I sat next to Nikki, gazing out the plane window at the drifting white clouds. He held my hand and whispered, "Don't worry, everything will be fine. I'm excited to meet your parents, even if they're a bit biased, like you said." I smiled, but my heart felt heavy. I had told Nikki about my childhood, about Chase's shadow, about being constantly compared to him. But I still hoped this party would be a chance to mend things, for my parents to see me differently, without comparing me to him. The drive from the airport to Beckley took us through familiar roads, where the lush green hills stood quietly like childhood memories. Our old family home came into view with its slightly chipped porch, weathered roof tiles, and Mom's small garden blooming with yellow daisies. I stepped out of the car, taking a deep breath, inhaling the scent of damp grass in the air of home. Nikki smiled, pulling his small suitcase, looking as natural as if he belonged here. I hugged Mom, noticing she was thinner than the last time I saw her, her hair streaked with more silver. Dad sat in an armchair in the living room, coughing a few times, his face pale from years working in the mines, but he managed to smile when he saw me. I introduced Nikki, and Mom hugged him, saying, "Come in, don't be shy." Nikki smiled, responding warmly. "Thank you. I've heard so much about you from Lisa." Chase appeared shortly after, stepping out of the kitchen in a sharp navy suit, white shirt, and a gleaming watch on his wrist. He clapped me on the shoulder, laughing loudly. "You're back, huh?" Still the tech girl, never changed. I smiled back, trying not to notice Mom's glance, which briefly passed over me before settling on Chase, as if comparing us. Nikki whispered to me, "Your brother sure knows how to steal the spotlight." I nodded, saying nothing. The party took place in the living room, decorated with gold tinsel and balloons. The dining table was laden with cakes, homemade cookies, and a vase of daisies Mom had picked from the garden. Relatives gathered in the room, buzzing with laughter and chatter. There was Aunt Linda, who always fawned over Chase, Uncle Frank, who loved telling stories of his youth, and a few close neighbors. Nikki blended in quickly, chatting cheerfully with Aunt Linda about his marketing job in Austin, about designing an ad campaign for the company. I watched him, feeling a mix of pride and unease. I wanted my family to see Nicky not just as my boyfriend, but as someone who understood me, who made me feel valued. But then, like a familiar script, the conversation turned to Chase. Aunt Linda, mid-sip of tea, turned to him, her voice full of admiration. Chase, you're such a beautiful son, sending money to your parents every month, regular as clockwork. This family is lucky to have you. Others nodded, chiming in. Exactly. That boy knows how to take care of his family, not like some who only live for themselves. My heart tightened. Nicky squeezed my hand under the table, his eyes saying, "Don't let it get to you." Mom, as if to pour fuel on the fire, looked at me with reproachful eyes. Lisa, why can't you be even a fraction like Chase? You should learn from him. Chase is taking care of this whole family. You know that. Her words, sharp as a knife, cut deep into wounds I had tried to bury for years. Nicky gripped my hand tighter, whispering, "Stay calm, Lisa. Don't let them hurt you." But I couldn't stay calm anymore. Years of holding back, years of hearing comparisons, years of quietly sending money without recognition, it all erupted inside me like an uncontrollable fire. I stood up abruptly, the wooden chair scraping loudly, startling everyone. My voice trembled, but was resolute. If that's the case, from now on, let Chase handle all the bills. I'll stop sending money. The room fell silent, as if the air had been sucked out. My parents' eyes widened in shock. Dad, his voice weak from illness, spoke up. "What money? We've never received anything from you." Mom nodded, her tone sharp. "Lisa, don't talk nonsense. You're off working far away, never bothering about us. When have you ever sent money?" I felt the blood rush to my head, a mix of pain and anger. Nicky looked at me, his eyes worried but supportive. I took a deep breath, pulled my phone from my pocket, and opened the banking app. My fingers scrolled through the transaction history, each line clear as day, $2,500 every month. Sometimes $20,700, sometimes $3,000, all transferred to Chase's account with the note for parents. I held the screen up for everyone to see, my voice calm but icy. "Here, for the past 2 years, every month I've sent money to Chase to give to you. You say I don't care? Then what's this?" The room went dead silent. Mom's mouth fell open, her hands trembling as if she wanted to touch the screen. Dad sat up straighter, his eyes wide, his voice breaking. "Lisa, is this true?" Relatives began murmuring, their admiring glances at Chase turning to suspicion. Aunt Linda muttered, "My God, what's going on?" Uncle Frank, usually quiet, turned to Chase, his tone stern. "Chase, what's this about?" Nicky, unable to stay silent any longer, stood up, his voice soft but clear. "Lisa has worked so hard to take care of this family. She didn't want to boast, but I think everyone needs to know the truth. She sent money every month, even though she had to live frugally in Austin, working day and night to earn it. I don't understand why there's been such a misunderstanding." He looked at me, his eyes giving me strength, but also filled with concern. "You're not wrong, Lisa. They need to know the truth, no matter how painful it is." The small living room of our house in Beckley, once filled with laughter and childhood memories, now felt like a tense stage for a dramatic play. The light from the ceiling bulb cast shadows on the stunned faces of everyone present. The gold tinsel and balloons decorating Mom's birthday seemed out of place in the heavy atmosphere. Mom sat there, her hands trembling, her eyes glued to the phone screen. I had just shown where the bank statements were laid bare, clear as day. Dad, despite his frail health, sat up straight, his eyes wide as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Relatives whispered among themselves, their gazes shifting between me and Chase, trying to process what had just unfolded. Mom was the first to break the silence. Her voice trembled, almost breaking. "Chase, you told me that money was from you. You said you were providing for us." She looked at Chase, her eyes filled with both pain and shock, as if a part of the world she had believed in had just crumbled. Chase bowed his head, his face flushed, his hands clenched into fists. He said nothing, sitting there like a child caught doing something wrong. I stood watching, my heart pounding, not out of anger, but from a deeper pain, the pain of realizing that my younger brother, whom I had trusted completely, had betrayed that trust. Nicky looked at my mom, his eyes sincere yet serious. "Lisa loves this family, and she doesn't deserve to be misunderstood like this." His words were like a cool breeze, soothing the storm of emotions raging inside me. Dad, his voice weak but steady, looked at Chase and asked, Speak, Chase. What's the deal with that money? What did you do with what your sister sent? His tone wasn't angry, but it carried a deep disappointment, as if he had just lost something precious. Chase lifted his head, his eyes darting away, then stammered. I didn't mean to, Dad. I just borrowed it for a bit. I was going to pay it back later. He took a deep breath and finally, unable to bear the weight of the stares fixed on him, he confessed. I kept most of the money. I only gave you and Mom a little, a few $100s a month. So you'd think I was taking care of the family. I needed the money to pay off debts, to keep up appearances. I didn't want you to be disappointed in me. The room fell silent again, but this time it was a heavier silence, as if everyone was trying to digest Chase's confession. All those months I had scrimped and saved, lived frugally, worked overtime to send money home for my parents. It had all been a tool for Chase to maintain his image as the beautiful son. I looked at him, searching for a trace of the little brother who used to chase me around the backyard to play ball, who shared a cookie Mom made with me. But before me now was a young man, his face flushed with shame and his eyes avoiding mine. Nikki, standing beside me, spoke gently to the room. Lisa didn't want to make a big deal out of this. She just wanted her parents to live well, without worries. But I think from now on, things need to be clearer. Lisa deserves to be recognized, not for the money, but for her heart. He turned to me, his eyes soft. You make me proud, Lisa. I know you didn't want to boast, but today you needed to speak up to protect yourself. His words were like a balm, easing the storm of emotions within me. But they also reminded me that if I had listened to his advice from the start, things might not have gone this far. Chase, after a long silence, finally spoke, his voice trembling. Lisa, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I got caught up in debt. My projects, they weren't like I said. I lost money, racked up debts, and I needed the money to keep up appearances so Mom and Dad wouldn't be disappointed. I was wrong. I didn't think things would go this far. His confession left me both angry and pitying. Angry because he had lied and used me, but pitying because he was my brother, and I knew he was also a victim of the expectations he had placed on himself. The truth about Chase slowly came to light. The grand projects he boasted about on social media, the SUV, the designer watch, the lavish parties, were all funded by loans, debts, and worse, the money I had sent for our parents. He had used most of it to sustain his flashy lifestyle, giving our parents only a few $100s a month, just enough for them to think he was the beautiful son. I looked at him, my heart torn between pain and disappointment. But more than anything, I realized that the distance between us wasn't just a matter of personality. It was a matter of honesty. Mom covered her face, sobbing. She grabbed my hand, her voice trembling. Lisa, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you did so much. I was wrong all these years. Dad, his voice hoarse, looked at me with eyes full of regret. I was wrong, Lisa. I always thought you didn't care about the family, that Chase was the one looking out for us. I never imagined you. He trailed off, unable to find the words. I saw his eyes red, and for the first time in my life, I felt he truly saw me. Not as Chase's shadow, but as his daughter. The relatives in the room, from Aunt Linda to Uncle Frank, began to murmur. Aunt Linda, who had always praised Chase, quietly set her teacup down, her eyes confused. Uncle Frank looked at me, his voice low. Lisa, I had no idea you were quietly doing so much. I always thought he didn't finish, but his eyes for the first time held a respect I had never seen before. A neighbor whispered, turns out Lisa's the one carrying the family. Who would have thought? I looked at everyone, my heart torn between pain and relief. The truth was out, but it didn't bring the joy I had expected. I only wanted my parents to live well, free from worries. But now I realized that my trust had been betrayed, and my family had been clouded by lies and favoritism. Chase looked up, his eyes full of remorse. Lisa, I'll pay the money back. I promise I'll make it right. But I didn't know if that promise was trustworthy. All I knew was that from this moment, everything in our family had changed forever. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm. Mom, Dad, I began, my gaze sweeping across the room. I didn't want things to come to this. All I ever wanted was for you to live well without worries. But what just happened has made me rethink everything. I can't continue like before. Mom looked at me, her eyes still brimming with tears, as if she wanted to say something, but I raised my hand to stop her. I needed to say everything, to set boundaries I had never dared to consider before. If you want me to keep supporting you, I said, my voice slow but resolute, I have some conditions. First, I don't want to hear any more comparisons between me and Chase. I've lived my whole life in his shadow and I'm tired of it. I'm Lisa, not some lesser version of Chase. I looked at Mom, then at Dad, my eyes not angry, but firm. Second, from now on, every expense needs to be transparent. I'll send money directly to you, or I'll pay the bills myself. I need to know my money is being used for its intended purpose. And third, Chase needs to contribute too. If he wants to be part of this family, he needs to take responsibility, not just make empty promises. The room fell silent. Mom nodded slowly, tears still streaming down her cheeks. Lisa, I agree, she said, her voice choked with emotion. I was wrong to compare you to your brother. I promise I won't do it again. I just wanted our family to be harmonious, but I made so many mistakes. Dad spoke up too, his tone weak but steady. I agree, Lisa, you're right. From now on, everything will be transparent. We won't let this happen again. Chase, still bowing his head, finally looked up. His face was flushed, his eyes full of shame, but also a glimmer of determination. Lisa, he said, his voice trembling, I know I was wrong. I'm not just apologizing. I'll try to make things right. I'll contribute. I'll help Mom and Dad, and I'll live more responsibly. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for a chance. I don't want to lose this family, and I don't want you to think badly of me forever. His words, though I wasn't entirely sure I could trust them, softened my heart. Nikki, sitting beside me, gave a faint smile and whispered, You did well, Lisa. Setting boundaries is necessary, and I believe your family will understand. He turned to Mom, his voice gentle. Ma'am, I know this is hard, but Lisa just wants fairness and transparency in the family. She loves you and your husband so much. Mom nodded, grasping Nikki's hand, smiling as if she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. What was supposed to be a joyful occasion had become a turning point for our family. Mom, after wiping her tears, stood up and hugged me tightly. My daughter, I'm so proud of you, she said, her voice trembling. I'll never forget what you've done. Dad, unable to stand, grasped my hand. His eyes were full of gratitude. I felt a small spark of warmth in my heart. Not because of the recognition, but because for the first time I felt my family's love unclouded by comparisons. The birthday party ended quietly, with no one in the mood to cut the cake or raise glasses for a toast. Relatives left one by one, whispers about Chase, and the truth that had just been revealed lingering in the air. Nicky held my hand, his eyes a steady anchor amidst the storm of emotions. Are you okay? He asked softly. I nodded, but inside I knew I needed time to process everything. The truth had been laid bare, leaving me with mixed feelings, relief that I was finally seen, but pain that my trust in Chase had been shattered. I looked at Mom, Dad, and Chase, my family, the people I loved, and wondered if we could heal these cracks. In the months that followed, I returned to Austin and continued my work as a software engineer, but with a new resolve. I would care for my parents, but on my own terms, with clear boundaries. I opened a joint bank account with Mom, teaching her how to check the balance through an app, though she still complained it was too complicated. I sent money directly to that account, $2,500 each month, sometimes adding a bit more when Mom mentioned unexpected expenses like fixing plumbing or buying new medication for Dad. But this time, I ensured everything was transparent. I sent Mom copies of receipts, called to confirm she received the money, and asked for her verification. I don't want the past to repeat itself, I told her over the phone, my voice gentle but firm. Mom nodded through the video call, her eyes full of gratitude. I understand, Lisa. I won't let it happen again. As they promised, Mom and Dad began to change. They stopped comparing me to Chase, no longer mentioning the clever younger brother or the pride of the family. Instead, Mom called regularly, asking about my work in Austin, about the projects I was working on. Being an engineer must be tough, right? She asked, her voice curious. For the first time, I felt she was genuinely interested in my world, the world of code and circuits. Dad, despite his failing health, started telling neighbors about Lisa, the engineer in the big city. Once he called me, his voice hoarse but warm. "I'm proud of you, Lisa. I was wrong not to see it sooner." Those simple, heartfelt words were like a balm healing the scars in my heart. Chase, after the incident at the party, struggled to pick himself up. He admitted to me that his grand projects were nothing but failed gambles. He owed money to banks, friends, and even loan sharks. "Lisa, I tried so hard to succeed, to make Mom and Dad proud," he said over the phone, his voice full of regret, "but I went down the wrong path." I didn't know how to comfort him, but I advised him to find a stable job and start over. Chase nodded, and for the first time, I saw him take his promise seriously. He found work at an auto repair shop in Beckley with a modest salary, but enough to cover his expenses and contribute a small amount to our parents. Each month, he sent $300 home. Not much, but it was his first real effort to live responsibly. Mom told me. Chase started spending more time at home, helping Dad fix the fence or taking me to the market. "He's trying, Lisa. I know he was wrong, but I believe he'll change." I felt relieved, not just because of Chase's changes, but because I had finally stepped out from the shadow of comparison that had weighed on me for years. I no longer felt the need to compete with him or prove my worth. I was Lisa, a software engineer, a daughter, a woman living true to her values. My work in Austin thrived. I was promoted to project team leader, guiding a group of young engineers. Nikki was always by my side, supporting me through busy days and nights when I worried about my family. He became an indispensable part of my life, not just a confidant, but a reminder that I deserved to be loved and respected. A year after that fateful birthday party, Nikki and I decided to get married. We chose a small church on the outskirts of Austin with a cozy atmosphere. Soft light streamed through stained glass windows onto rustic wooden pews. Nikki, with his refined sense of style, insisted on adding white daisies reminiscent of Mom's garden, and we hired an acoustic band to play gentle love songs like "Can't Help Falling in Love." I wanted a simple wedding, but Nikki turned it into an emotional, unforgettable day with small details that kept me smiling. Handwritten cards for guests, a small dessert table with homemade cookies, and a photo booth with a wooden frame engraved with our names. "This is our day, Lisa," he said, his eyes sparkling. "But it's also a day for your family to see how happy you are." Chase attended, dressed more simply than before, no longer sporting designer watches or flashy suits. He hugged me, saying, "Congratulations, Lisa. I'm trying to be a better person." I nodded, not bringing up the past, but in my heart, I hoped he would keep his word. The wedding was filled with joy, free from favoritism or comparisons. Relatives from Beckley, including Aunt Linda and Uncle Frank, were there, and this time they spoke of me with genuine respect. "Lisa's truly a wonderful daughter," Aunt Linda said, her eyes no longer fixed on Chase as they once were. I smiled, feeling the fairness I had waited for my whole life. When I walked down the aisle in my white wedding dress, my heart seemed to stop. Nikki looked like a dream, waiting for me at the altar, his eyes shining under the church's light. The band played a gentle acoustic melody, and as I approached, taking his hand, I knew this wasn't just a new beginning for me, but for our family. The ceremony was filled with joy, free from favoritism or comparisons, only love and reunion. As we exchanged vows, I looked into Nikki's eyes and said, "I promise to love and cherish you the way you helped me find myself again." Nikki smiled, his voice choked with emotion, "And I promise to always stand by you, Lisa, no matter what happens." We exchanged rings, and when I kissed him, applause erupted from family and friends. I looked at my parents, Mom wiping tears, Dad smiling, and Chase standing in the corner giving a slight nod as if in support. My family, once divided by favoritism and lies, was slowly finding its way to love, fairness, and clarity. Years later, Nikki and I built a life full of joy. We bought a small house in Austin with a little garden where I planted daisies just like Mom's in Beckley. I continued my work at the tech company, and Nikki started a small marketing consultancy where he shone with creativity and passion. We often visited my parents, bringing small gifts, a new camera for Mom, a comfortable armchair for Dad. My parents now greeted us with smiles and stories no longer centered on Chase. They talked about Mom's garden, Dad's health, and asked about our life in Austin. "As long as you're happy, I'm happy," Mom said, her eyes free of any trace of favoritism. Chase, after years of struggle, finally found his path. He paid off his debts through his steady job at the auto repair shop and later opened a small garage in Beckley. His business did well, not the grand projects he once boasted about, but enough for him to take pride in his achievements. He continued sending $300 a month to our parents, sometimes adding a bit more when he could. He began making up for past mistakes, not just with money, but with actions, fixing the roof for our parents, taking Dad to doctor's appointments, or simply sharing dinner with them. Once he called me, his voice sincere. "Lisa, I know I messed up, but I'm trying to be someone you can be proud of." I smiled over the phone. "Keep trying, Chase. I believe in you." And for the first time, I truly believed he could do it. Our lives as siblings, once divided by favoritism and lies, had found a balance. I no longer lived in Chase's shadow, and he no longer chased unrealistic expectations. Our family, though not perfect, had learned to love each other fairly and transparently. Looking back on my journey, from the quiet girl in Beckley to the happy woman beside Nikki, I realized that family bonds are only truly strong when built on transparency and fairness. Love without fairness ceases to be a refuge and becomes a wound that's hard to heal. Only when each person is valued for who they are can a family endure as a place to return to, rather than a shadow that binds a life. Thanks for watching. Take care. Good luck.